Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hope everyone had a wonderful lunch. If we could go ahead and take our seats, we'll get started with this afternoon's first panel. So kind of a little rules of the road and protocol for this one. If anyone has questions that they want to ask the panel, would like you to just go ahead and use your notepads that's in front of you. Write it down on the notepad and hold it up. We'll have volunteers coming around to take those, and we can give them to the moderator, and then we can get the questions answered like that. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Cadet 4th Class Grady Gills to introduce our panel moderator. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dr. Andrew Ho has a Doctor of Management with a concentration on Homeland Security as well as Homeland Defense from Colorado Technical University. He is the Chief Cybersecurity Engineer at ITS LLC, serving as the primary cyber engineering and architectural consultant for Sensor, providing for the sustainment and ground-based systems that support 6 unique weapon systems in 12 locations under the Sensor contract. He also serves as an individual mobilization augmentee for the Air Force Space Command, supporting exercises and evaluations. He has received multiple FCA awards, such as the Young FCN of the Year, the Emerging Leadership Award, as well as the Medal of Merit. Currently he is the Regional Young FCN VP for the Great Plains Rocky Mountain region. He has also been recognized as a recipient of the 40 Under 40 Award by Colorado Springs Business Journal, as well as FCA International. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Andrew Ho.
Hi, how's everyone doing today? Good afternoon. So those of you who know me, I got many different things in my job jar. Yes, please have an entertaining look at Nick while we're sitting down here. Got a lot of things in the job jar. Obviously, we started a small business, me and a couple of my associates, and that's been growing well. AFCEA takes a lot of our time out of our day. It's a labor of love, right? And I think a lot of you are here because this is part of your labor of love. This domain demands that you give it some love, right? And so before I introduce this super especially talented panel to all of you, I wanted to talk to you about the mission of Young AFCEANs and all the great things that this chapter has done in the past 10 years since I've been here and part of this community. First off, I want to thank some of my mentors, Mike Curry, who's a previous president of this chapter, Mike Varner, who couldn't be here with us today, Fred Mooney, former chair of this symposium. Without your support, this panel would have never seen the light of day, and because we've never had the advocacy for it. Thank you to Bob Wright, Vanessa also for having a vision to bring this panel forward. The Rocky Mountain Young AFCEANs have been responsible for the branding and the logo that you see, numerous social media accounts, countless minor league baseball games for networking events. Several years ago, we got a home for a disabled veteran, right? We raised enough money to get a home for a disabled veteran. So those are great achievements. And it's with great pride that I can even talk about those achievements, but I'm even more interested in introducing such a unique panel to you today. This panel is something that's kind of been burning inside me since I moved here to Colorado Springs. So it's kind of a culmination for me of sorts, right? If you have come to this particular panel to hear the same old talks about vision and thoughts, you're going to be disappointed. I have tasked this panel to challenge you, the audience, the leaders, the peers, to be better. Ladies and gentlemen, whether we like it or not, the defense of our country and our homeland is a team sport. So the panel you have before you ranges in ages from 25 to 34. I myself can be considered the elder of the group. I'll be turning 40 in a few weeks. But the idea of this panel starts with this background. I started my Air Force career and showed up at Whiteman Air Force Base in Knob Noster, Missouri, right? Missouri, right? I showed up at Knob Noster, Missouri for September 2001. My start to my career in government was 9/11, right? I have known nothing but the war on terror. And so, as a young lieutenant to now being a reserve lieutenant colonel, as an industry partner, as a philanthropist in this community, I have staked my career on understanding the principles of leadership within this very curious technical domain that we're going to talk about. It was into my career, very soon in my career, that I learned about the value of leadership, right? I could easily tell you about all the horror stories throughout my journey, as could many of you. But you have to stay with me on this pop culture reference, right? Does anybody in here watch The Office? Yes, many of you, right? You know who I'm talking about when I talk about Michael Scott, right? If you don't know, Michael Scott, the regional manager of Dunder Mifflin, a paper company in Scranton, Pennsylvania, is a terrible manager, right? It becomes hilarious to us as we watch it on TV. He takes management tips from YouTube and tries to implement it into his company, says inappropriate jokes at all times, and it's all stuff that we can have a good time and laugh about. But at the core of Michael's management style, and it's probably going to be a paper that I'll write, you know, that's what we doctors do, we write papers all the time. At the core of Michael's management style is love for his employees. My first direct boss in the Air Force, terrible. Cared about checklists and stoplight charts, never spent a lick of time with his airmen, never got to know them, never got to meet their families. And the stories go on. Later on in my career, I had a senior leader, a Space 06, tell me, cyber is just not that important. It was absolutely the most demotivational words told to me in my career. And ladies and gentlemen, I say to you that the panelists in front of you today and the generational stereotypes that are pushed before you are false narratives. This young AFCEAN generation is highly motivated to do great things. It is incumbent among those who manage this demographic to ensure their motivation stays high and that there is a mission that is close to their hearts, a labor of love. It is when this motivation level wanes that an employee begins to wander. And you'll hear some of those stories on this panel today. I've made it through my short career because of great leaders and terrible managers. And like I said, leadership is also love. After talking to my panelists in our pregame today, they all have plenty of experiences in their short time where someone took them and paved their way, a true mentor, took obstacles out of their path instead of putting it in their path. If as a leader you care about metrics, measurables, and not more of how you got there, then maybe you should question your leadership style. We're here to challenge you. We're going to question how you've done things, all right? The problem here is not technology. We have plenty of technology in this room. The problem here is the people domain. And they're going to talk a little bit about their cool technology, but the problem is our human limitations we place on ourselves. And quite frankly, there's too much at stake here to put those limitations on us. So finally, the last thing we'll talk about is innovation, right? Innovation, everyone says the word innovation over and over. It's more than just a word. They're doing crazy innovative things that I have never thought I have heard about, and I'm still learning how to grow in my career. I went to a Microsoft seminar in Seattle, and they was talking about, focused on AI and machine learning, and the topic was cow insemination. How can you figure out what gender of a calf that you want to come out of that cow? They were using AI and machine learning to do that, all right? But since their industry, the government has a lot to learn from their diligence. So more importantly, if we as government entities are agreeing that, we agree, right, that innovation is important, we use the word all the time, we need to accept the fact that failure is just as important. Case in point, when I was a captain, I was privy to a conversation between my boss, grade 06 leader, right? He was talking to a peer 06 of his, and the discussion was about development of people. My boss says, we cannot be a one-mistake Air Force anymore. And his associate replies, we aren't. We're a zero-mistake Air Force. Innovation cannot survive unless you are willing to accept failure in the same vein. And if you aren't willing to accept failure, what's your organization learning? So today, here we are, and the tinder of how we do business in government and industry has been in a slow burn. We need to get it to a controlled inferno, right? And these problems that we have in government and industry are not too tough to solve. We have the human capital. Deliver us less buzzwords like bandwidth. I've been told to go cyber something. Got it, sir. What is he talking about? Right? We will bring you that expertise. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce our panel moving forward. And I actually don't mind if you want to applaud in between, because I think they're doing amazing work, and after they speak for a little while, you're going to be impressed with what they do as well. So I'm going to start with Stephen Forsyth. He's a solution architect at NVIDIA, focusing on solving some of the more difficult problems within the federal space using artificial intelligence. He has experience in applying deep learning to a plethora of problems such as cybersecurity, deep learning security, and object detection and classification, and has expertise in embedded systems and HPC. He has a background in physics. Anybody fall asleep in their physics class before? It's a pain sometimes, right? So ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Forsyth. Next we have Sean Madej. He's a cloud engineer at Google, where he specializes in leveraging machine learning to solve business challenges. Sean is also an Air Force reservist and has held a variety of civilian technology and entrepreneurship positions during his professional career. Sean was formerly the director of Patriot Boot Camp, a nonprofit focused on helping military veterans build technology companies. Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Madej. Next we have Nick Little. That jacket is quite a formidable enemy against the Patriots jacket we saw earlier. Nick is the founder and CEO of Forge Aerospace, where he spent the last 10 years developing state-of-the-art content delivery and content processing software systems for both commercial and government customers. In addition to his extensive technical background, Nick is well-versed in customer development, business development, marketing, and the day-to-day realities of running an early-stage company. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick Little. And finally, we have Pedro Urbina. He's a software developer whose passion is taking Microsoft incubation projects to market. Pedro has contributed to moving SQL Server to the cloud, big data, augmented reality, I love HoloLens, and AI. Pedro's current focus is leading a team that enables machine learning using simulation techniques. Pedro holds a bachelor degree in computer engineering from Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. I took Spanish 2 years in high school. Ladies and gentlemen, Pedro Urbina. So what we'd like to do is kind of give each panelist a little bit of a 3 to 5 minute time frame for them to do an intro about themselves and the work that they're currently doing with their companies. So I would like to cede some time and start off with Stephen.
Hi. So my name is Stephen Forsyth, as he said, a solution architect working at NVIDIA. I eventually got my undergraduate from Georgia Tech with a physics degree. So originally, I started working on a collaboration known as LIGO, which is the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, trying to detect these things known as gravitational waves. It's nerdy science stuff, but it's essentially what happens when two black holes spiral around each other and eventually merge. There, I learned a bunch of stuff about HPC, about coding, about just everything you would need to know about how to solve a problem. LIGO is it's an international collaboration, so you're working with thousands and thousands of other scientists around the world. So having that collaboration amongst the group is especially when you're so isolated from everyone, is definitely helps build character. I got hired to NVIDIA about a year ago, where before they hired me, or about, I'd say, a few months before they hired me, I knew nothing about deep learning. I taught myself everything that I know about deep learning in the span of about a summer, just because it was very interesting to me, because just everything about it seemed like it was the future. I didn't know at the time when I was teaching myself anything that how deep learning was actually integrated into every last aspect of everything at this point. So I sort of lucked out on that point. I think I used my skill as a millennial in that fact, that I know how to, I think millennials are very skilled in a sense that we know how to find answers and apply those answers that we find more rapidly and easily. I was making a joke earlier that millennials know how to use Google, and it sounds like a little trivial joke, but the skills needed to be able to just deep dive into a specific problem without having this overhead of all this technical knowledge that you need is a very unique millennial trait to have. I've worked on several projects throughout my career so far. It's a very short career, but several projects where I knew nothing about it going into it. But from my skills, learning how to navigate the internet and learning how to navigate the information well that is out there, that is the hive mind, which is the internet, I think has definitely benefited, I think, every millennial out there who knows what they're doing. And I think we're going towards a different direction these days with millennials, where not every single person needs to be an absolute expert at every single Python or shell script out there. They can learn along the way, and that's kind of what my career has been thus far. Currently working at NVIDIA. Been working here for a little over a year now. I've touched just about everything within that's tangential to artificial intelligence, from cybersecurity to deep learning security, which is essentially just trying to fool AI into classifying or believing it's seeing something that it's not really seeing. I've also worked on signal processing, which is my background with LIGO. That's basically what I was doing, was picking out signal from the noise. I've also done a lot of work with HPC. That was my original work with LIGO. And I continue to innovate into cyber, where this is kind of my growing field at the moment, trying to integrate myself more and more with the cyber efforts within NVIDIA and trying to push out into helping the government along the lines with that. And so that's kind of what I've been up to, and that's my career so far. And
Stephen is kind of, we'll say, the baby of our group at the ripe age of 25 years old.
Just turned 25, too.
Right. Yeah, and just turning 25 and studying black holes and how they're moving. It's already actually beyond me at this point, Stephen, but thank you. Sean Madej, please, tell us about your life a little bit at Google.
Yeah.
Small company.
Thanks. Yes, this was a small company when I joined the first time, but it's grown quite a bit. I started my career as an Air Force intelligence officer and arrived at my first duty station working with Air Mobility Command just as the surge in Iraq was kicking off. And we, as an intel shop, had a mandate to try and understand where aircraft were flying, where threats were present or where incidents were occurring, and then to try to do some correlation between the two so that we could help risk mitigation efforts being conducted by leaders, decision makers, and pilots. I've always had an aptitude for writing software, and so we quickly realized that we were using humans to try to correlate this information, and it just didn't scale to to match the level of operations that we were required to support. And so we started writing some simple algorithms, some simple code that would ingest this information programmatically, allow it to be mapped, and create visualization so that our analysts could very quickly identify visually where threats were intersecting operations. It was a tremendous opportunity for me as a young second lieutenant to drive innovation and change. It was also an incredibly trying time. Being a change agent in an organization is grueling work. It is grinding work. And after a couple of years of that, I was pretty well burnt out. And so I left active duty after my 4.5-year commitment and landed shortly thereafter at Google. Had a phenomenal opportunity to spend 4.5 years on the Google Earth and Google Maps team. That was my first exposure to artificial intelligence and machine learning, the topic of this conference. I was able to be part of a team of researchers at Google who were taking the entire corpus of Landsat imagery, so all of the imagery that the US Geological Survey and NASA had collected for almost 40 years of the Landsat program, running advanced parallel computing on it to try to find perfect pixel, we called it, perfect pixel analysis, to try to find the one perfect pixel for each latitude and longitude on Earth. So the single pixel that didn't have atmospheric distortion or cloud cover. It was amazing. It was amazing to see 500,000 CPU core hours used to try and assemble this beautiful mosaic. And it really got me excited about the art of the possible with regards to machine learning and neural networks. I left Google after 4 years and tried some startups. First startup I worked for was trying to apply natural language processing to the Twitter stream. We ended up getting acquired by Twitter. Then I joined a startup that had a grant from the National Science Foundation to try to apply machine learning, natural language processing, classification to creating an indication and warning engine based on open source news reporting. So we built the framework for sucking in 36,000 news reports a day, letting the machines read this information, try to discern the severity, try to discern the usefulness as it may relate to global commerce and supply chain management. About that time, I had my third daughter, and that changed my risk calculation, and I needed to jump out of the startup world, ended up back at Google. That was 2 years ago. And I spent these 2 years at Google focused on bringing transformative technologies to state and local governments. So, the places we all live, the roads we all drive on, the dedicated civil servants behind the initiatives in these cities, counties, villages, and towns around the United States. It's been awesome. There's great civil servants in this country doing neat things. I always like to make the joke, there's 2 things that a government employee hates: change and the way things are. And so it's a turbulent time. We're all seeing the pace of change is broader, deeper, and faster than ever before. And I think we all need to find ways to manage this change. And I think change management is something we're going to talk more about as we discuss innovation and transformation through this panel.
Thank you, Sean. Next, we have Nick Little. Nick is also our local Young AFCEAN rep. We do have a Wednesday evening networking night that is not just limited to young AFCEANs. We don't discriminate based on age, obviously. Would be great to see some of you senior leaders there to network with our young AFCEANs. It's a great opportunity for them to show off all the great things that they're doing. But I would like Nick to talk a little bit about himself.
Yeah, first I'm going to do a plug for the Rocky Mountain Young AFCEANs. And anybody you know, please send them my way who's a young AFCEAN, and I will explain all the wonderful reasons why people should join this organization. We have happy hours here and there. We're trying to get more people involved, and it's a great organization. It's been really good to me. And also follow us on Instagram, both AFCEA International at AFCEA, and also AFCEA.RMC is the local chapter where you can get news from us about what's happening. So I encourage all you to do that. We'll try to keep it pretty fresh, and entertaining and meaningful. So I started Forge Aerospace about 10 years ago, right after college. I was in college. I wanted to start a business, and I met this guy named Harvey Gates, who coincidentally had ties into the big Safari program office. And so he thought it was a great idea for me to start a company. So I started a company, and we started working on airborne ISR programs. And I've basically been involved in airborne ISR delivery, processing, PED, whatever you want to call it, for about the past, I don't know, since 2010. I've been with the government, always really closely working with the government program offices in a consulting capacity predominantly, and we have been really focused on how does the government actually, adopt some more modern methodologies for integrating new technology. And I've been through a lot of painful learning experiences, and basically constant failures associated with how are you actually integrating, how are you actually modernizing your system, how are you actually upgrading new technology, and how are you doing a good job. So that's kind of, as a company, is what we focus on, is how can we work closely with the government for them to adopt agile practices. And then along the way, basically, I started another company that is about to launch, but that's a whole software commercial thing. And then that's basically what I've been doing. And there's a lot, it's like, I think I'm looking forward to the dialogue here to talk about, the innovation here, because that's what we're all here for, so.
Thank you, Nick. And then finally, we have Pedro here from Microsoft. A lot of amazing products, obviously, coming from Microsoft. If you could tell us a little bit about your career and how you've got to where you've gotten so far.
Yeah, I joined Microsoft 10 years ago. That's my whole career path. And I don't like to think about myself, so writing the bio was kind of cool. I've been part of a lot of the back history of a lot of innovation that has happened in the last 10 years, whether it's the cloud boom, whether it's augmented reality, or now AI. It's been an amazing journey. I joined 10 years ago as a tester. I just wanted to join Microsoft, so I crossed all the options, software developer, tester, PM, in all the products. So I ended as a tester in SQL. And I was whole by giants, amazing people that both mentor me technically, but also how to take risks. I'm not going to say Microsoft did every product originally the right way, but we definitely know what innovation is. I love to see how we evolve things from an idea through signal into a product, and how we always pivot to, in my opinion, build the right thing. And that took me 5 years ago to an incubation project that now is known as HoloLens. I actually had to somewhat lie to friends and family and tell them that I worked on the Xbox controller, because nobody asks you when you say that you work on the Xbox controller for more details. I was part of the bring up of a beautiful depth sensor similar to a LiDAR. I knew nothing about physics, and I knew nothing about AI. I remember the second day, Professor Blair giving me a doc, a white paper that had a lot of equations, and he went back to his country for vacation, and I remember crying to my wife and being like, why did I do this? And she told me, you follow your heart to the end. So it taught me how to innovate. And 3 years ago, we were working with AI, and AI has a data problem. And they told us that you couldn't do AI with synthetic data. And taking a page from all my mentors, we didn't take it for granted, and we asked why. And we distilled the answer until we find why not. And then we went from there, and it's been 3 years of a prototype, and then a small team, and then a bigger team. And it's been an honor. The second thing that I'm the most proud of after my daughter. And I'm here loving the panel and loving the conversation that we can have, because I was brought up by amazing people that mentor me, and I couldn't say more that I agree with the idea that the next generation are incredible, and they're able to learn from anything. We're just hiring mathematicians and physicists who can read a paper, and in a week be experts of AI. So we owe them a good path forward.
Thank you, Pedro. So I find it interesting, you talked about that you were like, well, I want to work for Microsoft someday, and yesterday I just struggled trying to figure out what I wanted for dinner.
Yeah.
So I'm really impressed of the drive, right? You figured out, okay, yes, I want to go work for Microsoft, and you're definitely providing credit to mentors. How does Microsoft talk about identifying you to put you in charge of a multi-million-dollar program at your age, right? Because that's a serious investment.
Oh yeah, Microsoft works a lot. Sorry to say the word signal a lot. What we do is there's more things that we can all work on. There's infinite amount of products that we could go build. So there's a lot of ambiguity on what to build next. So it's a trust exercise where you identify ambiguity, you have your instinct, you go, you work your butt off, by the way. You just kill yourself, got a prototype, got a proof of concept, got a customer to say, I'm interested on this, and then you iterate. And it's a trust exercise. You win one battle, and then they double the trust in you, whether it's giving you more of your own time, whether it's giving you a team, whether it's giving you a teams of teams. And you have to show through that when you're junior, you have to be able to do things by yourself. Then you have to be able to organize squads, and then eventually you have to let those squads self-manage. You have to let those people take over.
Mm-hmm. And so, Stephen, talk to me a little bit, right? So we have you here as a representative of NVIDIA, and I think most of the government customers understand NVIDIA, graphics card that helps me help my child play Fortnite longer, I guess, and play other games. What does NVIDIA do for AI?
All right, NVIDIA is, so I'm gonna just make a little assumption here that most people in the room know of NVIDIA only because of either tangentially off of video games or they've heard about GPU computing, but they don't know terribly too much about what we do, how we do it. NVIDIA started in 1993, which, not to make anyone here feel too old, but that's when I was born. So we started in 93 as a strict GPU company. A graphics card is all we did. We did video processing. We made video games look cool on the PC. That's the majority of what we did. About a decade or so ago, scientists found out that you can use these GPUs instead of just processing video to actually put data into it, live data. Or not, sorry, live data, but like other types of data that are not strictly formatted for video processing. From that, CUDA spawned, which helps basically helped spawn this thing known as GPUs, or general purpose GPUs, which about the same time as the big data craze kind of came around, merged into essentially what is now AI. The use of GPUs with big data, now that we have all of this data out there, we have a new way to process it, a new way to handle all of this data and make these calculations like we've never been able to before. So that's what GPUs do. About the same time that we were coming up with a way to communicate with the GPU that wasn't directly to video processing, our CEO had this vision. He saw where the company was going, he saw where the field was going, and he decided to kind of have a paradigm shift of the company to focus more on artificial intelligence, more on this deep learning that was coming about. So we are now, NVIDIA is now the AI company. We are the AI computing company. We help accelerate computing. We help accelerate artificial intelligence. Basically, any type of AI that you see that out there that people are using, they're most likely using NVIDIA GPUs. They're the fastest GPUs out there for artificial intelligence, and we're constantly pushing the research within our research dome, and we're constantly pushing computing to a whole new level. We're actually, NVIDIA GPUs are specifically focused on, or they're architected around speeding up artificial intelligence, deep learning applications. And we're now slowly branching into running more things on the GPU that aren't traditionally run on them. So like, we have this big initiative called Rapids, which just came out recently, which is to target classical machine learning, which is mostly just, K nearest neighbors, K means clustering, stuff like that. Basically take all of your data, put it onto the GPU, and then do everything on the GPU from there. So you load it to the GPU and it never has to leave again. So you can do your processing, once you're done processing it, you do a machine learning model on it, and then you can do post-processing all with the GPU to kind of help speed everything up. So NVIDIA is just a company that's looking to help speed up computation in every possible way with the use of the GPU. And so that's how we're aiding artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I know, as we talked about in our pregame as well, I mean, you guys are hiring all the big data analytics. Yeah,
we're at the moment, I believe we have just as many hardware architects as we do software architects. We were classically the GPU company. All the computational engineers went there. But now it's become, we hire just as many software engineers as computer engineers, and it's become, we are one of the biggest AI companies out there.
Thank you. So, Mr. Little, please talk to us about your time as a small business. And as you notice on our panel here, we have obviously some of the big three right here. We have NVIDIA, Google, and Microsoft, but we also have 2 representatives of small business. Talk to us about your difficulties with government and how you're trying to grow your business and find solutions, right? Because as we know, we're starting to see more small business involvement. But what difficulties have you come across as you're working through things?
Yeah, so I've worked for the government as a contractor for about 10 years now, and the biggest challenges that I've encountered is that every project that we have worked on, which I could go through them one by one, and they're all like pretty simple things, like we wanted to deliver airborne ISR to mobile devices using commercial mobile devices and commercial cell towers and commercial cryptography. That got canceled. So then we kind of moved our way down the data link, and we were running this ground station program, and we were running an agile program doing releases every 90 days to the field, out into reality, supporting the warfighters right at the edge, and we were doing a good job. And then our bigger program that kind of was around, that was supposed to be doing the job that we were doing, they're like, oh, you know what, we want to do agile too. All right. So they sucked us up. And we went in there and we, basically implemented a rigorous agile process. And then we got ejected like a virus. It's just like, no way. Like, we can't, we got fired again. And so then we get rehired by the same customer to do the same thing. And then we proceed to get fired again. And then rehired again. So it's just like every 6 months, basically, for about the past 10 years, for some reason, the government system systematically tries to fire us as a small business and then rehire us. And then all the good programs that we've worked all get canceled. So this is the biggest challenge in dealing with the government is, I think that every program we've ever done has been a good idea. We always showed up, we always worked our tails off. But for some reason, and this isn't just me. When I speak about we, it's also the partner companies that we've always been working with, and also the civilians in the active duty personnel. But for some reason, when we actually bring change into the government and we actually start doing these things that are innovative and actually start adopting these sort of latest and greatest technologies, well, then all of a sudden we get kicked out. Because that's why your joke was perfect. Because it's that is the epitome of what it is. And fortunately, the thing that keeps me going is that I have other good friends who are active duty, civilians, and they just refuse to quit. And that's my personality as well. And so the only thing that keeps me going in this industry is I have a small group of friends who basically refuse to quit, and we just keep on pushing, and we keep on doing everything we can to try to get closer to the customer, to try to understand what is the actual problem that we need to have solved, and how do we go in there and actually, how do we really solve it? And unfortunately, the government makes that really hard. So from a leadership perspective, what we really need is leaders who are willing to actually take risks and not basically fire us every time we take a risk. And so, I don't know, I could talk a lot about, the challenges, and I wish I had a lot of good solutions, but unfortunately I don't. This whole industry, we have a very hard set of problems, with the FAR and the regulations that, you have to comply with. It really makes it, as a small business, almost entirely cost prohibitive to even do business with the federal government. And so, but fortunately, there's enough people out there, I think, who are really actually trying to do the right thing, to actually make the system better. And so, what I would basically say to everybody in here is, when you go back to your organization, it's change is uncomfortable, but it's happening, and you have to let it happen, and you have to basically, okay, something just changed. That doesn't mean go back to what you were doing yesterday. It's all right, embrace it, move forward, and go on, and and adopt change. So,
well, let me pivot from that then, and then lob one towards Sean's way, discussing. We talked in our pregame as well about talent management, right? And Nick kind of alluded to that. what kind of innovative ways, or how is Google, I mean, obviously everybody in here wants to work for Google, right? Except the Microsoft guy, right?
I don't.
I'm kidding, of course, right? But Google's like one of the big, one of the bigger ones, but how are you handling talent management, right? Because there's a retention rate that we talked about in our pregame that's much higher than, say, the retention rate, and I have fellow commanders in here, the retention rate in the military, right? People are leaving, they're leaking. We have to find and identify the reason why they are leaving. How do you handle talent management at Google?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big reasons I came back to Google, right? Is I think even as a large company, they've done a good job of scaling the culture, right? And I think you can't ordain innovation, right? I mean, I think we see a lot of people preaching about innovation and transformation. I think one thing that Google got right, and many other companies as well, is they create the right environment where innovation can organically occur, right? And so, in Google, that means hiring people you can trust and letting them work on projects they're passionate about, right? So everyone has a critical job they need to get done, but we also try to carve out time for them to work on interesting projects. And like Pedro talked about, if those projects reach a critical mass of adoption, if they look promising, you get these self-forming teams that start to glom around them. The other thing I'd say in Google is, there's a product manager in Google, so someone who leads the roadmap for a particular product cannot tell anyone to do anything, right? You have to win advocacy through vision, through leadership, and you can't be an overly prescriptive manager and leader. It just doesn't work in the Google culture. Engineers, we're primarily an engineering company, have a lot of autonomy, and if they don't like a project they're working on, they have free will and they can move to a different project, a different team, a different part of the company. And so I think when you have those baseline rules around trusting people, giving them lots of freedom, you have to have a different set of governing circumstances in order to get things done and turn out great products. And we as Google today have 8 products with over 1 billion daily active users, and those aren't 1 billion total users, that's 1 billion per product. I mean, it's amazing the scale of what this company has accomplished, and I think at its core, it's an engineering company, and it looks at everything through the lens of engineering and problem solving.
And so let me pivot a little bit as well. Again, in your time as the Air Force, currently an Air Force reservist, and myself as an Air Force reservist, does that reserve model work towards helping active duty try different things, right? Because we've had many discussions with our active duty counterparts on how we're in this box. This is the box we get to play in, right? But on the reserve side, you have amazing experiences that you get to do in industry. How does that work in that integration with trying to help big mothership, right? Trying to do things better.
And I think, it's a tremendous opportunity, right? I think the Air Force, the military in general, has a phenomenal group of people on active duty and even more so on the reserve side, right? Reservists show up because they want to be there, right? Believe me, the systems make it easy to want to quit when you can't. It's not a pleasant experience being a reservist from an administrative perspective. So people are showing up to do the work because they want to be part of the team. And they bring a wealth of experience and a wealth of professional understanding that their active duty brethren may not have, right? And so I think if we really do look at solving these problems as a total force, we have a tremendous opportunity to bring in talent from Microsoft, talent from Facebook, talent from all of these Silicon Valley companies. There are reservists all over the place. And we need to find ways to bring their expertise in and help them drive transformation inside of the organization. And I think a few organizations, and I primarily speak from an Air Force bias, but in the Air Force are doing a good job of this, right? So Kessel Run, CyberWorks, I think is ahead of the pack here. I think on the Army side, Army Futures Command is thinking about this. But across the board, this is a major differentiator for us that the People's Liberation Army just doesn't have. And so we need to find a way to leverage this from a talent management perspective to make us all better at what we do, provide better national security for this great country.
You make a great point about innovation with, like in China, I mean, we say innovate or die, like we're threatening people to work harder, but in China they actually mean die if you don't innovate, right?
Yeah, innovation in the United States military is hard, but at least we don't have political officers standing over our shoulder.
Right,
so
absolutely.
We have that going for us.
So as we move into this next topic, and when we talk about innovation, right, because that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to be better at something. That's what innovation is. And many of you may be parents out there. You need to let your child fail, right, to learn something. As they're learning to walk, they have to fall down a couple times. And many times as for myself, I have 3 daughters, and I want to foster them and I want to help them. I don't want to let them fail. I'll walk behind when my 8-year-old was an infant, walk behind her and make sure she didn't fall down as she was walking so she wouldn't hurt herself. But when we move that analogy and start talking about true innovation in the workplace, and I'm going to lob the grenade to any of our 4 panelists here, is why does it even matter? Because if we're just running our heads into the wall and expecting a different result, we all call that insanity, right? Why do we want to keep pushing this innovative edge? Why does it even matter? And I'll lob that to any of you.
So innovation is extremely important to, some of the more successful companies are the most innovative ones out there. You have your Googles, your Microsofts, your NVIDIAs. From my experience, jumping off something Sean said earlier, you need to be able to create a culture within your company or organization of this innovation by, at least from what I found in NVIDIA, is by giving individuals the independence to be able to be as creative as possible. So when I was hired to NVIDIA, I was hired to the federal team. I was the first new college grad hired to basically an all PhD team who have had years and years of experience within the federal government. And instead of my boss sitting there and micromanaging every last thing I did, he gave me complete and utter independence of what I could and should do for the company. So with that, I decided to take the route of what is the best thing for me to do and what is the best thing for me to do with the company. So how can I learn the best and how can I use that to better the company? And by doing that, so far, I've had an extremely successful career at NVIDIA for the past year or so, where I've already been put on, I think I've submitted 2 papers in deep learning, and then I'm on another 2 papers. I'm helping with our cyber initiative, getting a lot more integrated in that. I think having this, allowing young people to have a lot more independence and have a lot more say at the table is definitely a good way to spur that innovation that you need, and to not punish them for failing. I fail literally all the time. I break every single thing I touch, but that's how I learn. That's how I think millennials are really good at picking things up and learning how a system works, how it gets done. If you look at what's happening with things that happen in the tech world, some major catastrophe, or not catastrophe, but something, really bad bug or something happens, you don't see hundreds of layoffs happening. You see people, they get punished, but they continue to go on because they're smart and because people make mistakes. And I think within the government, there's a lack of that, flexibility with, allowing them to stay on and continue to do what they do.
I'm going to jump in here. So the question is like, what does innovation mean? And I'm going to explain this in a context of a project I've been working lately. I just decreased my infrastructure budget. We're running about 10% of what it used to cost me last year this time. So that means I have for running our infrastructure, I'm now 90% off. It's like, that's a pretty good deal. If I was at the store and I could be like, oh, I'm going to take that deal. But we would have never been able to make that leap if we weren't sitting there looking at like, gee, maybe we can, adopt these new technologies. And not only are we running at 1/10 of the cost, it's cheaper to maintain operationally. So we need less engineering staff to do this because we basically adopted serverless functions. I don't know if anybody, but so that's what innovation means. When you innovate correctly, you can get orders of magnitude more savings. As is one example of like a metric of where you can impact, where innovation can impact. Another example, in this industry, it's like, all right, are we being more effective at our mission? And so innovation in the context of this industry either means I'm saving money, or I'm foiling more plots, or tracking more bad guys, like whatever you want to say. But that's the type of, that's what innovation needs this industry, and we need to be looking for opportunities to basically decrease and run your same IT system at 1/10 of the cost. That's not an outlandish requirement. Like, you know, maybe 10 years ago that would have been harder, but now with like the cloud and there's so many opportunities, like you can save cost everywhere. Or like run it, you know, deliver capability faster. So there's all these things that we can do that are like, and they require innovation and they require experimentation and they require, you know, lessons learned, right? You know, because you aren't gonna get it right on the first time, trust me. You know, maybe not even the second or the third or the fourth. I mean, that's what like Thomas Edison said. He's like, I know 100 reasons how not to make a light bulb, and I now know one that's really gonna make me a lot of money. But you know, it's like that's kind of the game we're playing here. Is it's like we're going out there, we have a mission objective, and we have to focus on that mission objective or cost objective, and basically let people run loose. You know, I mean, it's like when we're operating a tenth of the cost, it's like if you would have asked me a year ago whether or not I thought it was possible, it would have been like, I mean, you're dreaming. But then it's like we kind of like said, all right, let's try it. And it's like, holy crap.
And I think that's, you know, I would make the argument that the military doesn't have an innovation and transformation problem. We have a change management problem. They're innovative, smart people who are coming up with amazing ways to do new things. And it is the rate of change and adoption of change that is the blocker. And I think this is generationally something we have to work past, and culturally we have to ingrain into our organizations. Change is going to be a constant. You cannot preach about innovation and transformation and have your folks show up and use the same tool set that you were using 20 years ago. That's just, it's not congruent, right? And so I think we need to think through how we can make our networks more adaptable so that we can leverage these tools like Trello and Slack and G Suite, right, from a Google perspective. All of these amazing tools that your private sector peers, the iPhone, right? I mean, we talk a lot about this. The iPhone came out in 2007, and today the average Department of Defense employee can't manage their career, email, and collaborate from a mobile device. This is a problem, right? Before we talk about machine learning and artificial intelligence, we might want to go back and do a postmortem on why adoption of this 12-year-old technology
mobile devices
has been so laggard.
It's like everybody in here uses their mobile phone every single day, constantly. Yet for some reason,
Pedro, talk to us a little bit about, how about the training aspect, right? We're talking a little bit about talent management. We're talking a little bit about retention. How do we keep people in jobs that, you know, this is a pretty innovative job. It's a pretty leading edge. It's pretty fascinating. What kind of training do you need to go do this job? Because I got a bunch of, you know, 05, E8, E9 people who want to retire and make a ton of money.
Can you?
Yeah, talk about the training aspect for Microsoft on, like, say, HoloLens. What level of understanding, comprehension do we have to be at? I mean, is this really, it's very sciencey. Is it really as hard as it sounds?
It's not. It's a matter of how you approach it. I actually think that the best thing that millennials have for us is that we just took for granted that we can challenge things. I don't know how many of you read an instruction manual. I haven't read one since I'm born. I just play with all the buttons, and sometimes I break it, and I learn that I should read it, and next time I just don't do it, and I play again. So technologies like HoloLens and technologies like the cloud are actually intimidating, but it's an amazing, and same thing for the Google Cloud, same thing for all the tech that is coming out of NVIDIA. It just takes a second to jump in. There's training materials online. These things don't break, so you can just go at it.
Well, so here's kind of an example, or some like along those lines. So there's these things called serverless functions, which the basic idea is you take a function, and in the very old days, you turned on the rack and you plugged it into the wall and you had air conditioners, you know, right? And then you got this thing, you had the server, then we got to VMs, and it's like we had this VM, and then you're like managing, you know, groups of VMs and whatnot. Well, then all of a sudden I hear one day about serverless functions. You just take your code and you put it in the cloud and it just executes when you need to. I was horrified when I read this. And the reason I was horrified when I read this, because I knew deep down that I had to go that way on the infrastructure, but I was looking at my fleet of 20 servers, and I'm just like, oh my God, like this is gonna be painful. But just like you're saying, you know, you go online, within a day I have like a little example running, and it's like, oh, okay. And then all of a sudden, within a couple months, basically, we have entire, we've fully migrated. And so I think this is like the thing is, it's like, you hear these things, and if you don't adopt them, it just becomes more and more and more expensive to maintain this legacy infrastructure. And so it's like almost like when you hear that point of, oh, serverless functions, as everybody should be hearing in this room right now, it's like that is the future of how you're all going to build your systems.
And I think it's just an extension of what we've always talked about, right? We've always talked about being lifelong learners, right? You want to learn as you grow. Well, we need to be lifelong adapters. And we need to adapt not only ourselves, but the organizations we work for, and the equipment and the tool sets we bring to the fight.
Okay. So we're going to move into kind of our final domain, and part of it was talking about cross-generational leadership, cross-generational management. Obviously, in this domain, we're seeing different subsets of all kinds. In particular, we'll talk about cross-generational. For myself, in my particular experience, I haven't really deviated too much from how I've managed or led people in the Air Force versus how I've managed or led people in industry. As I've spoken before, my premise on everything is love, right? Is to care. We do have to care about our people. We do have to care about what's going on in their lives. Someone comes to work in a foul mood, it's probably not personal. There's something else going on, and we have to be cognizant of that. Some of you may know I have my fifth other career. I'm a college basketball official, right? So the thing that we always say is that half the crowd hates you, and then the other half of the crowd hates you even more, right? And so I've been called some things, names. Some names I didn't know words went together sometimes like that. But the reason I talk about that stuff is trying to understand people's perspective, right? When they show up to work, when they show up to a function, something's gone on during that day, and we have to be cognizant of that. Whether they're 60 years old or 20, everyone has a life. And we always talk so much holistically about not being the one who's living to work, right? We want to be the one who works and still has a life on the side. So, the question I pose to you gentlemen, and as you're growing in your careers, is what has worked for you? What leadership style works for you, or what do you want to become in terms of a leader that you think is actually going to help manage this workforce? Because as we've talked about, this workforce is willing to grind themselves into the ground. They'll get that Starbucks at 10 p.m. and work until 3 in the morning if you give them a mission that means something here. It's not always here, and I think that there is a rub for that generation, is that selfish, right? We've used that word for this generation. They care about themselves. It's not about dollars. If you give them, and there's plenty of studies out there that it's on paper. In fact, I'll just write a paper and make it so, right? It's a mission of love. If you give them a mission that they care about, and this goes across industry, this goes across government, this goes across military. Give them a mission that they love. They're not here because they're making $200,000 a year. I don't know what you're making, but it's a mission of love. It's an industry of love. So talk to me a little bit about your leaderships. What works for you? What do you want to be when you, I guess I'll say it, what do you want to be when you grow up? What type of leader do you want to be?
I had a ton of examples on, I actually want to be the leaders that I've run across the way. You always latch into Saurabh Singhal or Ross King. Those are my go-to mentors that I've respected over my career. We were making a joke. I'm one of my teams, I had to motivate a team of engineers to care about storage. It's not easy. It's just literally, hey, we want to make storage slightly better for customers. I respect and envy your mission. It's much more meaningful. The only way that we motivate our people is through trying to be the best and letting them be the best. It's kind of a two-way sword, right? You have to enable them to be what they want to do, so that you need to let them use the cloud. I've had so many fights with engineers about me thinking that they're doing the wrong thing, and then them proving me wrong, and somehow the next time not remembering the lesson and challenging them again. And men, just give your people a mission that they can strive, but also you owe them the responsibility, you owe them the ability to execute.
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad question, but
Purposely so.
to keep it pretty simple, it's just like never give in. Like number one, Winston Churchill. It's like it's about the customer. You know, this whole whenever you're doing whatever it is, it's about going out there and doing something for the customer. This industry, it is so easy to get people motivated, and we have the great mission. And you know, the challenge this industry faces, it's like how do we make sure we can keep the people motivated? And so that kind of goes back to what, you know, basically Forge Aerospace. We're actually going to rename. I have new partners. We're going to rename it. It's going to be called Paradox Global. But our whole new thing is what we want to be as a company is a company that basically just gets all of the roadblocks out of the way so that we can bring in young, innovative people who want to support a customer, and they can just go in and they can do the job. And we can bring in other entrepreneurs. And basically, we want to be like the anti-government contractor who's still a government contractor. But it's just like, that's like the whole focus is we just eliminate roadblocks, period. On the commercial side, you know, it's just like the type of leader I want to be is somebody who like, we just bring great products to market that are super affordable and people love them. Like, you know, Steve Jobs, like people love the iPhone. And like that's the type of stuff that I want to work on. It's like, let's do that. Anyhow.
You know, for me, I focus a lot on the tools, right? I think work is an extension of who we are. It's becoming even more so an extension of who we are. And we need the freedom and flexibility to do that work from wherever it needs to get done, right? And whether that's the Starbucks in the middle of the night, as you mentioned, I think we are, you know, we as a government are still very focused on a post-reductionist model of, you know, how the factory worked with 9 to 5 shifts, and we need to really think through how we can give our folks the tools to work most effectively and optimally where they can be most productive.
So I work way too much, which is probably becoming a problem. But I find that, you know, working basically from the time that I wake up to the time that I go to sleep, that happens because I find myself being extremely motivated by the projects that I'm working on and by the team that I'm surrounded with and the leadership that's there. The type of leader I think is really effective that I eventually want to be is one that allows, like I said earlier, is you know, this not complete, but a large amount of independence and creativity to each, you know, person on the team. I think that really helps, you know, when you're starting a project, either, you know, finding their own, you know, specific projects that they, you know, find interesting, or having a specific project and letting them, you know, look at different ways, creative ways to be able to solve that one individual problem, and not necessarily being told exactly, you know, you do this, 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 and being micromanaged the entire time. I think if you give people a project to work on where they have some type of, you know, creative freedom, they'll be able to put a lot more effort into it, a lot more of themselves, and they could be a lot more proud of the work that they get done with it. So I think that is definitely probably one of the better leadership skills that I eventually want to have, is be able to have something along those lines of being able to grant that independence, being able to allow for, you know, creativity of all sorts and all different levels of the project.
And I think, you know, I think it's incumbent on leaders to create the type of atmosphere where that can be the case, right? I think all too often in my experience in the Department of Defense, I see people who aren't necessarily overworked, but the work they're doing is monotonous, unrewarding, and uninspiring, right? If your job is to come in every day and take some fields from this spreadsheet and put it into this PowerPoint before the staff meeting, that is a problem that was solved, you know, a decade and a half ago, right? We have machines talking to machines, data moving data. All too often, we're wasting our human capital having motivated Americans do monotonous tasks.
Shut up and color. That's what they call it.
Yeah.
That mentality will.
I've seen so many government projects that could have been solved, well, that were basically solved, like a decade ago, that could have easily been automated or easily been, you know, assisted with AI or some type of new technology that's out there, that just spend hundreds and hundreds of man hours just working towards this one specific goal that could be solved in a matter of minutes.
And I think, back to the theme of this conference, right? Machine learning, artificial intelligence. Technology's always been a net new jobs creator, right? AI and artificial intelligence, machine learning aren't going to replace the jobs of anyone in this room. What it's going to do, if we harness it, if we find a way to get out of our own way, to adapt, to change management, to become those lifelong adapters, we're going to be able to increase the aperture of our people. They're going to be able to do more. The machines are going to take on some of that monotonous rote work that nobody wants to do anyway, and it's going to make us as humans more effective. And I think that's the promise of this technology, and it's on all of us to get the old processes out of the way and to get the culture aligned in such a way that we can take advantage of this fourth industrial revolution.
In kind of going, one of the things that I see is, and this, given that the topic is AI machine learning, the biggest kind of caution that I would put out there is there are some incredible applications of AI and machine learning, absolutely. But it's not this, it's not the answer for everything. In so many cases, the answer is actually just focus on the customer and, go in there and just, give something to the customer. So I've been involved in programs where it's like, we got like the AI and machine learning rammed down our throats, but in reality, we just need to do some really simple stuff to help out the customer. And so I think that that's something I want to caution everybody is that, if we need these processes that enable us to like short circuit customer feedback, and in this industry it's hard because it's like the customer is not necessarily the person who wrote the check, right? The customer is the person, we have this weird split customer thing happening, but we need these short circuit feedback loops where we can get the feedback and we can actually fix it for them, which may or may not require AI and machine learning. I don't know. I think that it's a kind of a buzzy word right now. So I just, if everybody goes away, it's like be like, oh my God, we need AI and machine learning. Maybe let's ask our customer and let's see if we can work something in there. Oh, we just needed a simple thing to get the thing out of the spreadsheet and onto the
slide.
Yeah.
One stat I'll throw out there, it's really interesting. Today, 20% of all Google searches are coming in via voice. This is a vast change from where things were just a couple years ago. So you've got an entire generation of users, of consumers, who are expecting to have a conversational interface into software systems. And I think that is, again, increasing the aperture, right? If we could take people's fingers off keyboards, it frees them up to use more of their cognitive skills in other places. And so I think that's something we, as an industry, are quite behind on, right? If it took us 12 years to get to the poor level of mobile adoption we have now, that doesn't set a great precedent for how we're going to adopt a very real, not nascent, right? This is a mature technology. Speech-to-text technology is very mature. Microsoft has a great offering here. Google has a great offering here. You're not leveraging it, right? And so I think we need to baseline, not on what machine learning could be and what it might do for us, but what it can do now and what we can do to get there faster.
Yeah, current AI, there's a bit of a misnomer that current AI is here to replace everything and everybody's jobs. Current AI does not have that capability yet. Modern AI is used primarily for augmentation of your workflow. So it allows for, say, in the cyber threat case, it allows you to detect specific well-known attacks that could happen to allow your analysts to be able to find the more one-off ones. So they're no longer specifically looking for, oh, is this attack right here, one that we've known and seen a million times, is this happening? No, they're looking for the more difficult ones, and they're putting their resources into other things that are more applicable. So, AI has definitely a large spread, but it's good to keep in mind that it is more for augmenting workflows to allow our workforce to be able to actually use their resources in a more tailored way that best helps the effort.
And there was a secret, there was a really good nugget on what you just said, is the jet. In 10 years, AI will be what probably people think AI is today. Mm-hmm. And by then, if we haven't tackled it, and we haven't, both as companies and as the government, we haven't tackled it the right way, that person monitoring a stream, that person protecting a cyber threat are going to be much more efficient on the other side, that this is not going to be, we have the opportunity to react.
So appreciate all that input right there. I do want to give a little time for questions from the audience. In the meantime, while they're running those questions, I think Phil's coming up right now. I think there's a lot of violent agreement. I see a lot of the uniforms, they're shaking their head like, yeah, we're super thank you. We're super motivated. We want to move forward. And then something gets lost in the translation along the way, right? At some point, you graduate from, I don't know, I'll take the analogy of going from company grade to field grade, and then all of a sudden you're like, I'm an iron major now, I got to get this checklist done, right? And then we forget about what got us there, right? The motivation and what helped us to get there. And so, oh, wow, okay. No, I have dinner plans today, so that's okay. Wow, thank you very much. So as we translate here, we're going to go to a few questions here. I'll try to get through as many as I can, and then we'll go from there. So we have about 10 minutes here, so if you can do very concise and amazing responses. And if not, I will post these to my plug, shameless plug. I post questions to LinkedIn afterwards, and if you want to add me on LinkedIn, I'll get these questions answered by the panel. I'm going to read this verbatim. Okay, I'm the Luddite here. The cloud is the future of storage. How do you secure your information when you have no clue where it goes in the cloud? I doubt if we want it on a server in Russia, China, or North Korea.
Oh, so yeah, I'll take that one. So end-to-end encryption is a very real and easily available and adoptable thing. So it's like I have a whole system in the cloud right now that it's just like, it's in the cloud. And guess what? I can't even see it. End-to-end encryption. I mean, so the CAT card got a bad rap because it's like this card, but that you can't plug into a phone. But the core technology in there, it's a little hardware cryptographic module that's like, and we use these all these time. Anybody who's been in the industry has seen these little things. End-to-end encryption, multiple layers of end-to-end encryption is a good way to move your data. So that's data, it's storage. When it comes to processing data, so like where are you going to run your machine learning, you need to have trusted infrastructure. But we already, that's happening right now. I mean, so like Amazon, for example, at the unclassified level, they have a ITAR compliant cloud. They have, there's other, clouds happening there, but the industry in the cloud is moving as well. And there's even other ways to okay, well, let's take this big cloud that exists commercially, and how do we create a pocket-sized cloud that we could put on an aircraft maybe? It's like even these concepts are still there. So the answer is sometimes you encrypt it, other times you just protect it. But that's the same game we've been playing the whole time.
And we don't mean to have all the answers. We're here. Google is here, Microsoft is here, NVIDIA is here. We're trying to get your side of the story, your side of the questions. We build infrastructure really well. Let us do that. You guys do what you have to do on your side. Put your requirements. We'll address them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say we're in a global arms race now to see who can build data centers and operate them the cheapest, right? And the three front runners are Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. Maybe Alibaba if we're talking about Asia. But for everyone else, this is a losing proposition. The economies of scale here are such that these organizations are going to run servers cheaper than you can run servers. These organizations are going to patch servers faster than you can patch servers. So to get past trust, right, we have all these third-party accreditations, FedRAMP and ISO certifications and SOC 2 and SOC 3. It's often just engaging in the conversation and asking the question. The commercial world has been getting out of their data centers for years now, right? This is happening. This is the way the world is going. And I think this question reflects that we still have some work to do in terms of education and trust.
So I'm going to add one more kind of point to this, kind of pulls it all together. So, in the domain, we've always had multiple levels of classification. And so in the CERN, that's going to go away. So the challenge is, when we look at our existing infrastructure, in existing data centers that we do have, we have to ask ourselves, okay, what of this workload can we put in the cloud? And what is the part that we really do need to protect? And so I support an Intel system, right? And it's there's a lot of servers out there, but we don't need all those servers. We need certain ones need to be, doing their processing. But a lot of other stuff that we are already maintaining, we could just as easily put in the cloud.
Yeah, just to say that in a little more controversial way, CIPRNet is a boat anchor that this organization, this agency is wearing around its neck, right? There is no longer a technical reason to have a CIPRNet. Today I have 256-bit encryption on my phone with data at rest, right? But we're tied to that legacy decision that was made decades ago And I don't think any right-minded technologist would make a decision to roll out a network like ZipRNet today.
Well, and this just goes back to with like, you know, the NSA, Commercial Solutions for Classified, Suite B program, Secure Mobility Access Package. Like how you move classified information to mobile phones is a known thing. Like this is like doable. And it's all basically end-to-end encryption and multiple layers of encryption. And so it's like you can move data to a phone.
Well, we only took 5 minutes on that.
Yeah, sorry.
That was a good question.
So I will say, I mean,
question.
I do this with panels. If you want to add me on LinkedIn, then just please leave a note that says, "Oh, I saw you at the symposium, and I'm not a Russian terrorist." You know, I will gladly get these questions posted on my LinkedIn. I think we do have time for maybe one or two more, so I will read this verbatim again. This one's more of a comment, but I think it is worth addressing. Some people see machine learning or artificial intelligence like the self-checkout in a grocery store. You need a person when there's a problem, but a lot of people or customers don't want to lose the human connection and interaction. That's why people aren't as accepting of ML or AI. I think we all violently agreement that the human should never be cut out of the loop, right? Any thoughts or that we want to address?
So yeah, I have a comment. I mean, okay. So it's not about replacing the human, it's about making their life easier. So for example, if I'm working on Intel and I'm trying to like, find a bad guy or whatever, it's like, if a system could recommend me things to review, okay, oh, hey, by the way, you might want to check out these 5 things. It's like we all like that on Netflix. We all like it on Amazon. Like a recommendation but it's not about replacing me as the viewer of the movie. They're just trying to say, hey, by the way, we think you might check these things out. And that's like a really good use case. I mean, like when you do a Google search, like the recommendation engines are running in our daily lives constantly. And like that's what we need to be doing, is recommendation engines. And it's not about getting rid of the person. It's about just saying, hey, check it out.
Again, just increasing the aperture of that human, making that human more effective, helping them discern vast amounts of data, because there's no slowdown in the velocity of data being generated. So we need to make humans more effective. That's the promise of this technology.
Okay. So I do want to close here. First of all, I want to thank this panel very much. There's a lot of high-level thinking here. It's not just about us trying to come up forward and say that we do want to make a stand and say that there is a very young workforce here doing some great, amazing things. But I think all 4 of them, and myself especially as well, is that we've never got to where we are without the support of you, of someone. You know, I can name my mentors. I have them on my iPhone right there, and they check on me very regularly, and it's a very appreciated thing. But this workforce doesn't get to where they need to be and doesn't help support the mission without those of you out there as well. So in conclusion, I definitely want to say this workforce, ready now. Let's get going, right? What I talked about before is that this is a team sport. Sometimes you get into the huddle and you have to look at each other and stare at each other very intensely and say, you need to get to work because we got something to go get done. And so if we're going to move forward, let's watch them fail, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes let's just watch them fail and see what happens out of that, and then let's watch them succeed. Either way, let's give them a chance. And it's actually a very amazing and motivated workforce. Thank you very much to all of you for coming to this panel. Thank you to our panelists for being a part of this. Good luck to you in all of your endeavors, and thanks again. Okay.
So, Dr. Hio, Stephen, Sean, Nick, Pedro, thank you guys for your insightful discussion there. Thanks for taking the time to come out to hang out with us. I think everybody got a lot out of that particular session, so thank you very much. Okay, so since we're having kind of a heat wave here in the middle of February, or the beginning of February in Colorado, it's our afternoon ice cream break time, sponsored by Zavaro and the exhibit hall here. So the first round of Tech Talks will start off in Colorado Hall at 15:45. You need to go out of the main doors, go left, go past the Golden Bee, and it's behind the Golden Bee, or just find a wingman that knows where they're going. And then following the Tech Talks, we hope you all join us for the grand reception that's going to be here in the exhibit hall, and that's sponsored by Forescout and Carasoft. And we will see you back first thing tomorrow morning, 0700, and our breakfast is sponsored by SEIC tomorrow. So have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.